5 Eastern Time in the United States. And I welcome everybody to the Mondragon 101 session at the Union Co-op Symposium from Co-op Cincy and One Worker, One Vote. We have here with us Ana Aguirre and Christina Clamp. So if both of you could introduce yourselves, starting with Ana, that would be amazing. And then we can deep dive into our conversation.
So hello everyone, this is Ana Aguirre. I am a co-founder of a cooperative called Tazebaez that in Basque means and why not. And I was part of the first generation of the entrepreneurship program of Mondragon University. So this is like one of my biggest links to Mondragon, other than the fact that my dad was a cooperative member of the bank. So as you would expect, once we entered the co-op world, I actually had very long discussions about co-ops and the corporation over dinners. But I am also part of the international cooperative movement through being co-founder alongside my company and others of the Young European Cooperators Network that later went on to be accepted by COPS Europe as the youth rep network for Europe in the cooperatives. And I serve as VP for Europe in the International Cooperative Alliance. So I have quite an overall picture of how the cooperative movement looks, at least at the youth level. So yeah, I bring this perspective to this symposium because I think that Mondragon is obviously a great example worldwide, but has a very good trajectory. But there's some things that I think we can improve. So I'm really excited to meet Christina here, that is probably much more knowledgeable than me of all things Mondragon, but at least I live it in my own skin every day. So I'm super excited to be with you, and thanks for coming to the session.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm probably at the other end of the spectrum in terms of engagement with the cooperatives. I first learned about Mondragon in the late 1970s. To put it in perspective, we were going through a lot of significant job losses in manufacturing. In Massachusetts, we saw much of the manufacturing base. We used to have 2 auto plants there, and they're gone. Machine tools were taking a dive. And so there were discussions happening at universities. And I was fortunate enough that being in Boston, I got to participate in discussions at Harvard and at Boston College. Boston College is where I was a grad student. And at a certain point, I was asked by one of my faculty, would I be willing to go to Mondragon since I spoke Spanish? And so in 1982, I headed over, hoping that I could find my way into the cooperatives. And I met another Aguirre, not Ana's family, but Iñaki Aguirre, who was the son of the first Basque president, the Lehendakari, and made a silly mistake with my Spanish that worked my way into the cooperatives, and had the good fortune of being there at a time when the cooperatives themselves were going through an economic downturn, and were really interested in my research question, which was looking at the management of the cooperatives. I went into about 1/4 of the cooperatives at that time, and had the chance to get to know the founders. I was given the invitation to base myself at Caja Laboral, which was the bank, and to interact with people who were involved in the entrepreneurial division that today is part of LKS, and have gone back and forth to Mondragon over the years. I did take the 1982 research and extend it into a longitudinal study in 1998 to see what happened to the people I'd interviewed back in 82 and what their career paths were. If you were in the last session, you heard Ivan Zugasti talk about how people really do come to work in the cooperatives and they stay. Ormai, who was one of the founders, would always tell people when they decided to go and work elsewhere that he wanted them to always know the door was open and they could return. And one of my friends, Pedro, did leave at one point for more money, and then went back to the cooperatives because he realized that he was much happier being part of Danobat and So when you think about the cooperatives, it really is a place that can become a lifelong home and career, and an experience to engage in a different way than the traditional corporation would work. So anyway, I'm still involved with cooperatives all these years later. I teach in sociology, but I active with cooperatives in the United States, working with the Local Enterprise Assistance Fund as their board chair, the Food Co-op Initiative as the vice chair there, the ICA group, which does worker co-op development in the States, as well as their related mezzanine funding organization as well. So, Ana, do you want to pick up the conversation here?
Oh, wait. Okay. So just wanted to let you guys know that there's an active chat. There's a first question already there. The video's ready if you want me to share that, and also the slides.
Yeah, I think Christina also suggested that we have the latest video of Mondragon, and I think it gives a very cool perspective. She found the English version, which I think is super cool that she did that. So if you want to share the video, and then we can take it from there. And I don't know where the chat is, but if you can share me
So
later,
the question is.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, but I think we can go through the video first, and let's see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be happy to come back to Leslie's question.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I am sharing the video right now. Okay, we're back from the video.
Thank you, Paloma. So I think Leslie's question is about collaboration with other schools. And so the program that Ana referred to with Mondragon University is an important example of how other universities and colleges can be networked with Mondragon through their Mondragon University has a program called Lean, and it's based in Bilbao, and is providing young people the chance to both work towards the goal of developing a cooperative as well as their skills as entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. So Ana, maybe you should share a little about your experience with that first class. I know it's evolved from that, but you probably
Yeah,
familiar with the model more so than I am.
yeah, for sure. And also, it's super cool that Leslie asked that question because I am the person that runs the program on the operations for Platform Cooperatives now, and that is what exactly I am right now in the Platform Cooperative Consortium conference. So I can tell you a little bit about both. As Christina was sharing, LANE program, that it stands for Leadership, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation, is actually a cooperative entrepreneurship program. And I'm super familiar with it because from Tazebaez, we have been leading the international branch to it. So I am super happy that you asked this question because we have been visiting the US for all the way since 2009, except the last 2 years because of pandemic. And there's hundreds of ways I can think of how to collaborate with that program, right? So cooperative entrepreneurship, and I would always say this: entrepreneurship, like forget cooperative, just entrepreneurship is super difficult, and cooperative entrepreneurship is extra difficult because in most of the places to create any kind of co-op is even more difficult to create than to create any kind of business that is not cooperative. And so, as Christina was sharing in Lane, that it's the leadership program, we have the capacity to teach people by doing. So people learn by doing. And the most important thing about Lane for me is to go back to the roots of why it was created. And this comes to the need of Mondragon when they were going international and that they learned like the wave of internationalization of the cooperatives actually stayed like settled. They realized that they needed people that had a global mindset, that were managers but also leaders, and that they were always able to create, not only sustain and manage existing businesses. So back in 2008, they went out in the world to find, let's see which models are there out. And they ended up in Finland in a very little town and took the program to Spain and managed it to go through the system of the government. Because one thing that they knew it was that they wanted an official degree on cooperative entrepreneurship. So back in 2008-9, we started 27 people that were very nuts. And, and today we are a network, Mondragon Team Academy, of over 2,000 cooperative entrepreneurs in 6 different, in 3 different continents, in 12 different labs, so campuses, that are working on social and cooperative entrepreneurship. And the program is just that. It fosters entrepreneurship by doing. So you are divided in teams, you create your own co-op in the first year, and off you go. The fun fact, though, is that Mondragon University supports, but Mondragon Corporation watches, right? For the first time last year or 2 years ago, I'm not sure, is when they first invested in a cooperative or in a company that was a spin-off from Lane. For the previous years, they didn't, because they were also just hanging there and seeing how many co-ops were they going to be created. And reality is that 96% of the people that graduate from Lane are employed, and 35% create their own company after a year, which in Spain, entrepreneurship rates go below 1% in regular universities. So take that. So yeah, I think there's super many options on collaboration with the entrepreneurship program. But because you mentioned the platform co-ops, I'm going to go straight to that because that's my program, also alongside the new school with Trevor Saltz and Jose Mari Luzarraga from Mondragon Team Academy. And yes, we are in our third edition to be finished in December, and probably will do one or two a year from here. And in three editions, we've been able to reach over 1,000 people from 57 different countries and 45 partner organizations locally. So if you are willing to be part of the organizations that join this network in order to be collaborators of the program, we are really looking forward to have US partners because we have quite some US participants. So yeah, reach out to me. I'm gonna leave my email over here, but this is good. And going back to Mondragon, I think this is one of the challenges that Mondragon is having in the last couple of years. And Antonio Cancelo, that is one of the former presidents of Mondragon, was always sharing. He's now 80 something. And he was always sharing that entrepreneurship within the group was going to be a big challenge. And he was one of the biggest fosters of entrepreneurship during his presidency. And he even held accountable to all the managers on how many companies were they creating within the corporation. So entrepreneurship and new businesses is one of the huge challenges that Mondragon is facing during these years. And I think Lane, as Christina said, is one of the fosters of this new project creation. I think. I don't know, Christina, if you want to take on that.
Well, I actually just finished working on some writing for a UN Interagency Task Force. So we picked up on the Team Academy model as one of the examples we wanted to bring forward and give attention to, because it really does represent a wonderful opportunity for how the social economy and cooperatives can come together to make greater impact, not just where there already are cooperatives, but to expand that to other parts of the world. So I think that's a really important piece of where Mondragon is today. I did see that there's a question that came in about healthcare services in Mondragon. So I think we probably should try to respond to that. Would that be all right, Ana? Do you want to start it off, or shall I?
No, go ahead.
All right. So important to understand is Spain has a national health program, but the cooperatives did not, as worker owners, could not be part of the national health system. And so they created their own health care through Lagunaro, which in Basque means sure friend. And essentially they use an HMO, health maintenance organization model, with having a clinic. Through the 10% that they return back to community, they also developed the hospital in Mondragon. And so health services is something that they have looked to build in the Basque Country to serve their members. And in doing so, through the examples such as the hospital, they're able to also serve the rest of the community.
Yeah. And maybe adding to that, I think the very cool part about the health system in Spain, taking into account that we have a regional health system, because I don't know how much you know about the way the Basque Country works, but we are semi-independent in some of the things, and health is one of them, thank God, because the rest of Spain is privatizing and we are not. So we have a very strong public system. And the cool part, though, is that the Social Security suddenly kicked out the cooperative members back. I don't know when it was. I was going to say the 70s, but probably I was wrong with my ages. I'm too young to keep my ages right. But the cool thing, though, is that instead of just giving up, what they said is like, okay, how can we ensure that people have their health coverage, right? Not only health, we're talking also retirement and unemployment funds. So they created Lagunaro, like Christina said. That today, the health system part of Lagunaro is actually out of the Mutua and gone to under the control of the bank, right? So it's now the service of those insurances are go there. But I think Lagunaro is one of my favorite cooperatives because it not only represents the way that they created a solution out of a very hard problem when they became uncovered by the social security, but they created the pension system, the pension fund, that not only does pensioning but also retraining when co-ops close, or when they need to change people. So I don't know how much you all know, but back in 6 years ago, I think, Fagor, one of the first cooperative of Mondragon, closed, with 4,000 people going unemployed at once in a valley that is very little. Mondragon is super small. Okay, so suddenly they had 4,000 people to take care of that were unemployed. And it was on the hands of Lagunaro to relocate those people. They did it in 2 years. It was unexpected, like no one even in their best dreams thought that people were going to be relocated that fast. And when you look at Lagunaro, they have one of the hardest jobs because they play in a way with the pensions of the whole group. And so they are very watched for. And they have some of the best people, not only presenting what they do, but how they do it. If you look at Lagunaro, I think is the clear example of what solidarity and common responsibility is for the group. That is, how can we cover holes that the overage support system for the social development actually works for the cooperative group. So I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think it really, really, really highlights what it is to face a challenge, to create employment out of a challenge, and to create a solidarity fund that is actually going to, and impersonate what solidarity means for the cooperative movement. Yeah.
So I see we have another question about the historical context in which the cooperatives were developed. So Ana, I don't know how you are in your history since you're so young, but I'm happy to start into that, and then you can jump in if there's anything you want to add. So yes, the 1950s, the cooperatives got started in the Basque region. It was a time of scarcity. There were many men who had gone into exile because of their having taken a position against the Franco government. My own friend Iñaki's family, because his father was the Basque president, they fled first to New York and then later to the south of France, and were not allowed back in the country until his dad died. And so it was a time where if you spoke Basque in public, you could get arrested, because obviously you must be someone who's not trustworthy and who's in opposition to the government. So by the time the end of the Franco period, 1 in 4 people had held on to the Basque language with functional fluency, but there were many, many people who had not had the ability to keep the language. So the cooperatives really emerged in a time that was adversarial. The fact that the Catholic Church, in the persona of Father Arizmendi Arrieta, was there, he was very, very adept at figuring out how to bring people together in ways that would allow them to create the cooperatives, and also to do things that would be important to maintaining language and culture for the Basque people, which is why there's a very close connection in the development and the early mission of the cooperatives that mix the two goals together. And so there was a point where the Franco government had considered trying to come in and shut things down, and Father Arizmendi Arrieta used his connections in Madrid to go and to ensure that the co-op policies would protect the cooperatives in the national co-op laws. So yeah, that's the early history on it. And even in terms of the types of products that were developed, such as the first product they made, the paraffin cook stoves, was really a reflection of trying to do something that met an immediate consumer need at a time when everybody was experiencing scarcity in the country.
And to add into that, I'm so happy because I'm even learning a lot, The cool thing, though, is that I always say, I don't know who Arizmendi Arrieta knew or what he knew about whom, because he got allowed to do things that are unthinkable for a Basque person in a dictatorship era. Arizmendi Arrieta, I don't know, when you talk to the historical people, most of the people are going to tell you that they didn't understand what he meant or what he said at any point. Not in a church.
That's right.
Not a church, not a school. So people just hang there and pretend to understand what he was saying and just shared their thoughts and, recheck with him, is this what you meant? And then he'll say, yeah, sure, like whatever, let's just act, right? So for me, one of the biggest visions, and in that very specific time of the history, was one person that thought in a vision that made what it is today, but so ahead of his time. And I love the fact that he created co-ops, right? But one of the key things, and me as a daughter of someone from the bank, I should say, was to create a common fund. I mean, when we talk about co-ops today, and in my case right now in the PCC conference here, when we talk about finance and support and investment in co-ops, we struggle. And so they did back there. And he had the enormous vision to share that unless they were economically sustainable and autonomous, there was no way that the whole community was going to, come afloat in a way. So he did two things very well. One, they created an education system that was enabling people to get trained to work, and he looked at it as from a very educational perspective. But Christina, I'm sure you agree with me that one thing that it was very fun is that he taught in church. If you talk to the people, he was, I'm not going to say eating their brain, but somehow he was like seeding through every single talk he did in church for people to understand that unless they did something together as a community, they were not going to come out.
Right.
And I think that he was addressed as a priest, but today, if he were alive today, he would have been addressed as a social entrepreneur, or even like probably named as Shaka Fellow, right? Because the impact of his thing. And then what I really like about him is that he kept challenging people. So they created what is the university today. They created FAGOR, what it was Ulgor back at the time. And then he said, well, we need a bank. In finance. And people said, like, look, we don't know what we're doing with one co-op, let alone the bank. And so he created it for everyone else. He went there and insisted. And when he didn't get an answer that he wanted, he just did it himself, like made people sign some papers and went to Madrid, to a dictatorship state.
Right.
And came back with a bank and said, well, the hardest part is done. The bank is accepted. Now we just need to run it. Right?
Yeah. When Jose Maria Ormaechea told me that story, and for those of you who don't know, he was one of the founders, and he became the head of the bank. And when the priest said to him, we're going to start a bank, he said, but we don't know anything about a bank. And he said, no problem. We'll just do it. And so they did. And so it was really a case of learning on the job for them. But it was like, oh no, what is he going to tell us we should do next?
Yeah, exactly. And then I like the fact that Christina raised like the law frame that they had back at the time. And this is something that we come across every day, even today, right? So there's a lot of countries that don't have a cooperative law, or that they have a weaker cooperative law, and not as inclusive cooperative law, or a very tricky cooperative law. And it looks like in the Basque Country we have an easy law, but the reality is that I co-founded my own co-op, right? Tazebaez back in 2013. And it was a nightmare, people. It was a nightmare. Like it took 8 months to get the right cooperative running. So if we wouldn't have been so convinced that we wanted to be a cooperative, it would have been easy to be discouraged by the process. Very easy. People even were really straightforward, asking, why not a limited company? Please, it's much easier. We're like, no, cooperative, right? And this is a reality nowadays, because when we look at Mondragon back in the day, they challenged themselves all the time. Every single new social challenge was a great opportunity for them to develop another co-op. And this is something that we, unfortunately, maybe, we don't see today, right? And we're starting to see now with the platform cooperatives running the course and again, once again, challenging the law, challenging the field, the field we play on. For once again, I think Mondragon is looking at the future, like opening the eyes to the future and saying, okay, what is it that it's going to take? Because we're an industrial, well, they are, I'm not even part of Mondragon, they are an industrial corporation, right? And a lot of people are looking at industry and saying, okay, either we're going to lose a lot of jobs or this is going to change dramatically. And I think Mondragon is in the midst of changing and evolving every day. And one of the things that I really like is that they need to be true to their values and keep employment running, because this is all the reason why they were created in the first place. So I think this is happening again. You know, the new waves of the co-op movement are coming. Mondragon is looking at it, and I think the video that we just saw is just the show that they're trying to look inside to, you know, grow outside. But I see them learning on how to challenge the system that they have been operating now for decades.
Ana, I'm so glad you raised the issue about what you were being told by people about the legal incorporation. My daughter went through something very similar with her cooperative. She started a cooperative 3 years ago, Samara Collective, and they do strategic messaging and communications. And when they were trying to figure out what they were going to do, they spent 8 months talking amongst themselves. And when they were reaching out for information, they were getting told by some legal advisors to go with an LLC. And because of me being her mother and my connections with the co-op community, we were like, no, you want to be a worker cooperative because an LLC could be demutualized. And but it's created some challenges for them because it's an ownership model that isn't well supported in terms of information about taxation, and it isn't well supported at state level where incorporation happens in the United States with how to go about and do the incorporation as a cooperative. So I'm glad you raised that point, because that is a challenge, I think, for anyone thinking that they want to do a cooperative.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about co-ops, and this is me as an outsider of Mondragon, maybe it's that, and I don't know which constituency we're talking up to right here. I see that there is 16 people, but I don't know who you are or how old you are or what you do with your lives. But one of the things that I've seen in the events, and I'm part of the cooperative movement in general, is that we are not a young movement. I'm sorry. Like, this is the reality. And yet, we have a model that speaks to all generations. And I think that is a model that speaks to the values that the new generation is bringing in, right? As a youth rep, I need to say this, and I need to tell you the best days of cooperative movement are yet to come, are ours to build. I don't think, I love Aritmendi and I love everything he said, and I think he was a great visionary. But I'm hoping that among you guys watching and among us here in the PCC conference and among us in Tazebaez or in the traveling university that I work with, we have the next people that are going to lead the cooperative movement. And not only managementally speaking, they're not going to be only great managers, but also great visionaries. I think we are having a moment where we need to redefine where our values are going to take us and which kind of companies we want to build. And I say this because for Mondragon, one of the clear things that I see every time is that we really need to look at cooperatives from a business perspective and a social perspective combined. And this was something that Aritmendi was super clear on, right? Because he said, unless we have cooperatives that are sustainable economically and that create wealth, we're not going to have wealth to sustain the communities that we are going to be rooted on. So in that sense, one of the great thoughts and teachings, and sometimes even one of the faults of Mondragon is that they talk business over values sometimes in the last couple of years, maybe tens of years. But I think that the restructuration of how we look at the way cooperatives are built in the region and beyond is going to be a challenge that we need to look upon. What do you think?
I think that there are a number of challenges that we face. One that surfaced in the last session is this question about individualistic versus communitarian values. And I know even in the case of Mondragon, I've seen a change from when I first went there in 1982. That was when they first were doing the recycling of workers between cooperatives during an economic downturn. And there was concern that people having to travel from their community to another community was creating anxiety and stress for people because they really wanted to just stay in their own cooperative. And then when I was back in the 1990s and I was visiting with some of my colleagues in the cooperatives and hearing about, this one's son has gone off to study in Great Britain and another one's gone off to live. And I thought, wow, that's really a significant change in terms of how people are thinking of themselves. And when I asked this one manager who I was friends with, he said, well, the fact that we've got regional air travel now in Europe in a way that's convenient, it makes it easier for people to move about. And so that was one of the things that I think is concerning, is how do you hold on to that quality of thinking in terms of us rather than me first, that I think was really important to the ability to grow the cooperatives. And I'm curious how you as a young person see it for yourself and more generally in the community.
Yeah, and this takes me back to the fact that I think that cooperative development, cooperative values, and entrepreneurial cooperativism is taught. I don't think people are born entrepreneurs. I don't think people are born cooperative developers. Just starting worker co-ops. Okay, goes to very close to what Leslie is just asked, so I'm glad we think alike. I am part of the people that, very few people maybe, that would tell you that Mondragon is replicable, right? I think that it is. I think that there's a lot in the culture of the Basque people where we are not superstars. We are not that special. Let me tell you, we're not that special. We're just very nice people, but not that special. But what people tend to overlook is that Arizmendi spent 10 years talking about co-ops before they started the first co-op.
That's right.
And how many people today in this talk or in the life you live would be ready to spend the next 10 years of their lives just talking about a cause before they even start something? This is unthinkable, right? Well, no, except Christina, here she is like sharing that she will, but and maybe me also, but this is what makes us special, not the fact that we're Basque. And I think that this is something that co-ops have very enrooted in the model, is that it's a way of life. It's not something that one day you're in, one day you're out, and maybe you go to the gym or no, but you're not a cooperativist one day and the next day you don't go. Like, that's not how it works. And for me, this was very clear, right? So when we were trained in Mondragon Team Academy in Lane, as people of Tazebaez, we were put together with people that from the second year of graduate school, undergraduate school, we knew we didn't want to work with in the next years of our lives. We just were forced to do it during the 4 years, and then you graduate, and then you're free of the people that you don't like. Well, we all liked each other. We were very nice people, but not for work. And when we created the cooperative, we realized that we needed more people, and they could not all be laners like us. So we brought people in that were from very different profiles. And you know what happened? That most of them didn't know co-ops when they arrived. They just came because they thought the cooperative was cool. The company itself, the culture that we shared was cool. So we've spent, I would say, every week since 2013 teaching and reminding people why we're here and putting the cooperative values in practice. And this is something that embarrasses me a lot of the times I share it, and sometimes I should take a stand and learn what are the cooperative principles and what are the cooperative values and be able to list them 1 to 7, right? The 7 principles. But sometimes I am not. I don't know. I think I know them, and if you ask me, probably I'll be able to name them all, but not in order, not in practice for sure. But we know what we talk about because we live it every day, and we take the time to remind ourselves that this is an active muscle, that participation in governance, participation in activities, participation in results, democracy at work is something that you either practice or you'll die. right? So when we talk about educating people to become cooperative members, we talk about the university, we talk about the everyday cooperative life, we need to remind ourselves that this is something that we need to acknowledge, be proud of, but also practice in everyday basis, because it is not easy. And Leslie, let me tell you, yes, there is ways to foster the creation of new co-ops throughout this undergrad program, for example, but it is still is not as easy as it should be for people to start co-ops, and it is not as present in the curriculum of the other Mondragon courses as it should be, to create or being able to create your own co-op, or there is no such an impact on how co-ops are different than the rest of the capitalistic companies. So this is a very good question, and I think it should be addressed more often than not. And if you talk, and Christina, maybe you can share your vision here, but a lot of the times, especially in big co-ops, when you talk to the people that the average cooperator, they sometimes have forgotten how lucky they are to be in the system. And they have forgotten that it is their responsibility as part of the co-op to practice co-op development. I don't know what you think.
Oh, you've raised a couple of things that I'd like to respond to. And I think the first is just a quick one, which is that years ago, I brought a group of women cooperators from the United States over to the government offices in Vitoria that are like the one-stop shop for anyone who wants to start a cooperative. And what they said to me that has always stayed with me is that because of the density of cooperatives in the Basque Country, it's not hard for people to be aware of it as one way to start a business. So it's not like they have to try and motivate people to consider it as legitimate, because they can see that it's legitimate because they're there. They're present in communities. So that's one thing. The other is that besides the program that you went through, there's Seolan, which is a business incubator for the cooperatives. And then there's been this opportunity within the cooperatives where there's a new program, product, or service to consider whether it's something that could be hived off into a new cooperative. And that's been done many times in the past. So I think that probably answers Leslie's question about how people start cooperatives. And then in terms of the education, Ana, did you go through the Ikastolas? You didn't. My understanding, though, is that from primary school on, in the Ikastolas, children are learning about cooperatives and participating in school cooperatives.
I would say that the Icastolas, it's a Basque word for schools, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they are schools that are public schools, normally super active in the development and preservation of Basque culture and language, and with a common curriculum, both in the Basque side of Spain and the Basque side of France, which is very
Correct.
cool, I think.
Yeah.
And most of the Icastolas are cooperatives, but as you would expect, the members are not the kids because they're underaged.
Right.
So the parents are,
Mm-hmm.
the parents are the members, and so are the teachers. A lot of the Icastolas are worker co-ops.
Yes.
Most of the Icastolas don't teach cooperativism actively, but they do teach them, again, in the values in practice, right? So a lot of the curriculum is settled on participation. A lot of the curriculum has activities that other schools don't, but they don't teach co-ops per se, which is good and bad at the same time. But this is the same as the university. You know, the University of Mondragon is very interesting because it's a multi-stakeholder co-op. What does that mean? Is that it is a worker co-op, so the members, the staff are members. It is some cooperatives that help it create the university are members, and so are the students. But the fun part is that most of the students don't know they're members, right? Unless you are a little of a freak, like I used to be, you don't know. And you would never be part of the membership of the people that are taking part on that and the station bodies, right? But the council, the rector council, the council of the university is made up by 9 people, evenly split between staff, companies, and students. So that means that the student body has a huge amount of power, right? It's 1/3 of the votes in the council, in the governing council. And then they have 1/3 of the votes at the General Assembly. But people don't know. And for me, this is hugely important, because how are we going to keep on a system that doesn't even teach the way it operates to their own inhabitants, right? So this is for me, is one of the shadows of Mondragon, right? Because sometimes I think that they feel that if they teach co-ops, they're brainwashing. But we don't have the same feeling when teaching capitalistic curriculum. You're not thinking, oh, I'm brainwashing citizens by teaching them limited companies. No one feels that. But yet, we are unable to put it in the same level, right? And so
Yes.
for me, this is very interesting, because I think it's a complex of inferiority. Is this an English word? Inferiority? Like a lower, that you feel smaller, right?
Right.
So you have that complex of like, oh, if I say that, they are going to say I'm a sect, or maybe that I am brainwasher and people are going to be part of my sect. And this is not necessarily true. Truth, though, is that 50-50 people that graduate from the University of Mondragon, 50 go to work in the cooperative, and 50% go out to other co-ops. So they do a pretty good job at brainwashing, no? Or no brainwashing in a way. But I think it's interesting that they don't even contemplate to have a stronger take on the cooperative model in general. And most of the castolas, as Christina was sharing, they are worker co-ops.
Yeah.
And this is a fantastic thing, because when I was younger, so when I started in the co-op movement internationally, I thought all the cooperatives were worker owned, like in the world. And and so I thought, like, because this is fun, because this goes along with what Christina was sharing, like people tend to be entrepreneurs in Mondragon, but you cannot find so many members of co-ops, worker co-ops right now, that went to the process of creating one co-op. Most of them have never created a co-op. So this is why when people in 2,000 or 3,000 people visit Mondragon every year, so Ander Echeverria, that is the dissemination director, he talks to me and says, okay, come and share your experience as a co-founder of a cooperative. Why? Because there are not so many anymore. Most of them are retired or dead, okay? Because the cooperatives are old. Good, because they persisted time, but not so good because we haven't been able to create successful businesses so much in the latest years. And so to share that value on the vision of people that have created co-ops and that have been starting cooperatives, it isn't easy, it isn't an easy job. I mean, being an entrepreneur isn't easy, but being a cooperative entrepreneur is not easy. And I think this starts on education, and I think Mondragon obviously did a good job with Lane, but just so you know, yeah. And I lost my track of that. I think I was going to share something more meaningful, but then I forgot. Recommend for co-op educators in countries where worker co-ops are not done. There is a very cool project that Mondragon collaborated with, and so did the Cooperative College now, that it's called UCOPE, that it's closing next week. And they are teaching teachers how to teach co-ops, which is super cool for me, because obviously in Mondragon there are good and bad teachers, like everywhere else, but I think that a program that helps trainers to train their students is super cool when we talk about co-ops. So let me find the link for you and I will share. I'm going to close the event there in Brussels on Tuesday, so I should know that.
Okay.
And I don't know if, Christina, you want to share? I mean, we're approaching the time. There's 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, no, I see that Leslie's asking about co-op education in countries where worker co-ops are not the norm. That's a tough one. I mean, there are online degree programs such as for the last 4 years, I was doing external assessment work for University College Cork. They have an online degree program. as does Mondragon University and St. Mary's University. There are a number of other programs around, but outside of university education, then it really becomes dependent on the solidarity economy, where there are groups that are organized to provide education and training. Co-op Cincy's got curriculum that they've developed. I know because I worked on a couple of the units for them. And there are other groups around the U.S. in the Bay Area and in New York where people are able to do stuff. The Cooperation Works folks, I know John McNamara is attending the conference and is involved with that group. And so they have curriculum for co-op education as well that admittedly Cooperation Works is working more broadly than just worker co-ops, but there's a lot of common content there that is useful. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Oh, and I remembered what I was going to share
Good.
before. And this about the cooperative education when people come to Mondragon, no? When you talk to people, and this started when I said that I thought all the cooperatives were worker owned. And for me, this is very important because I think the real Mondragon is utopicus because it is made of worker cooperatives. And I think that participation is high. Maybe people complain about participating, but participation is high because they have something at stake, right? Their salaries, their work, their employment, their family support is at stake. And every decision that they take in terms of management, of making longer hours, of making shorter hours, of lowering the salaries or hiring the salaries, all of that impacts them directly and impacts the people that work around them in the company. So that means that when you're a worker owner, you worry about the situation that you work on, and your head is in the line every time that you take a decision, and that decision is going to impact you directly, right? So when people that come to Mondragon and ask about this, ask what do I think, I always said, I didn't know that there were co-ops that were not worker owned. And while I do stand that any kind of co-op is better than not co-op, which is for me a fair reality, I do say always that I don't think that the cooperatives that are not worker owned, I think they're cheating the system in a way, right? And I always push people from the credit unions and stuff that come and, oh, I work in a credit cooperative. And I'm like, yes, and are you a member? And they said, no, not so much. And I'm like, okay, so for you, what is the difference between working in a regular bank and a cooperative bank? Because for you, it's the same. You're an employee, and maybe today you have a job, tomorrow you don't have a job. Do you have power? No, you don't have power. Okay, why? No, because ethically they are more aligned with my values. I'm like, oh, do you know Patagonia, the outdoor clothing brand? They are super cooperative, really. I mean, if you look at the values and what they stand and the policies they follow, and I had the luck of meeting the founder. Okay, so they are like a cooperative. They're super socially oriented. They love their workers. They're super good. They're not co-op. And if Yvonne Chouinard dies and their cooperative values fail, they're going to fall. And it's not because it's not embedded in the structure that they need to be solidarity oriented. It's not embedded in the structure that the policy is to share. It is not embedded in the structure that they need to give back to the community. It's something they choose to do today because who is in power? And unless they do a lot of work on keeping that culture at place, it will change. And I think one thing that I talk to my father over dinner every time is how strong is the culture of Mondragon? How solidarity oriented is it? And is it as solidarity oriented, the culture, as the structure? And what he always argues with me is that the priest made a system so well tied and so well embedded in each other that despite the people maybe changing a little bit to selfishness, the system was so hard to change that they couldn't change it.
Mm-hmm.
So the system makes people be more solidarity oriented than they truly are by nature, which for me is amazing. They created a system that makes people be more solidarity oriented than the humans are. So for me, this is fantastic. So this is what I wanted to share, that it is everything, not only in the culture, but the way we embed the systems and we structurally choose to be a cooperative, not because of who we are today, because we trust ourselves, but because of what is going to happen in the future with the cooperatives and the cultures we create.
That's a great place for us to end, I think.
Sorry, I hear the half of the conference coming.
So we are 5 minutes into the end of the session. Does anybody else have any questions? Or if Christina or Ana have a final closing statement? Me personally, I've enjoyed this so much. I'm like vibing here. It's, as Sally said, it's fascinating what you are bringing to the table. Thank you so much. Thank you really so much for sharing this time with us. Anybody want to ask anything, or you guys want to close? That would be amazing.
Yeah, I will share a little bit more with you. I don't know if you can hear what I'm saying because people are yelling here in my ear. So my closing would be that here's Trevor Schultz. There's the platform cooperative developer who I'm teaching one-on-one Mondragon. Yeah, so life happens, you know. A cooperative platform superstar here, just saying hello to me. Okay, so what I wanted to say is that keep in mind that this was made by people that decided to work together. And as Mondragon Team Academy, we normally say it's like we never do alone what we can do together. And we are not exceptional people, we just regular, ordinary people doing extraordinary things together in teams. And I think this is what Mondragon was, what was based on. And one thing that I always say, because I'm youth and I'm the youth rep, is that, and I said it before, is that I think that the cooperative movement is a modern movement, is aligned with the values that the next generation is bringing into the table. It is the movement that is going to change the world, I'm sure. We are not as small and not as in the sides than people really think. But it is for us, and it is our responsibility to put it in the map and raise our voice, not only in the forums where people are already converted to the people that are already convinced that this is the place, but actually in those places that people are yet to be convicted into understanding the system and into choosing to make this their system. And I encourage you, to learn more, to talk to more people, to defend it, to maybe provoke some thoughts that are challenging to the system as well, because I think that a lot of the steps forward come from people, raising their voices over challenges that the system has. And you're always more than invited to come to the Valley in Mondragon. I will be super happy to host you all. And yeah, I mean, I'm one of the believers that the best time for co-ops is yet to come, and I'm making my part for that to happen. So yeah, Leslie, I already shared my email, so please do text me, please.
So I would just second what Ana was saying about the value of being able to connect to the Mondragon experience firsthand. It really is a great opportunity for gaining motivation and inspiration for the next struggles ahead of you. So thanks for sharing. It's been a really nice opportunity. Ana, we hadn't met before, so I hope it won't be the last time. Please let me know if you're ever coming to Boston. I'd be happy to host you.
I may, because I have a wedding in Pennsylvania and it's May, so
All right,
watch
so let
for
me
your
know.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And Leslie, I did get your email, and this fun thing about this conference is happening online is that I met today people that I have been working with for the last 2 years, and things like, "Oh, you're so tall," or "I thought you were you were blonde," or things like this happened. So I'm super happy that we met in this space, and I'm sure that our paths are gonna cross. If not in Boston, in Mondragon, and everyone else. Thanks for reaching out, Leslie. Thanks for reaching out, and Paloma, thanks for the hosting, and Cincinnati.
Yeah, thank you,
for
Paloma.
having us. All right. This is my call. People laughing in the hallways. So
Thank you so much. And we are in time. People can go to the networking or wait till the next sessions at 3:35. Thank you, Ana. Thank you, Christina. Really appreciate your time and willingness to be here. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Super not Spanish of us, to finish on time. But I'm in Germany, so I'm learning something. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.